You are watching ColdfusTion.
This is the Nexus 5 bullet review. Find out what's good and what's not about the device and if it's the right phone for you without sitting through unnecessary information. The Nexus 5 is a mixed bag. It shares some of the same specs as many of today's high-end devices, but is only a fraction of the price. It's in the same class as the Moto X, and the Moto G can even join the fight. That being said, to keep the price low, corners had to be cut somewhere. Let's take a level-headed look at the Nexus 5 after all the hype has faded. Firstly, let's quickly run through the specs, just to refresh ourselves. On the front, we've got a 4.95-inch 1080p display. The rear camera is an 8-megapixel sensor with optical image stabilization. The Nexus 5 is pretty light at 130 grams. It features a 2300 mAh battery, a Snapdragon 800 CPU, and an Adreno 330 GPU. This is all coupled with 2GB of RAM. Okay, so now that we've had a refresher of the specs, let's start weighing up the positive and negative aspects of the phone. Firstly, the hardware. The hardware looks and feels great. A classy minimalist design with a soft touch finish to top it off. It shows that LG can really rise to the challenge when it comes to manufacturing great yet affordable hardware. As mentioned earlier, at 130 grams, it's really light. That's probably the first thing that you'll notice when you pick up the device. This lightness is welcomed, as the device still feels very solid in the hand. Overall, it's a very ergonomic little device. The second positive aspect, the screen. These days, smartphones are all about the screen. It's the interface where you interact with everything on the device. The screen is well balanced and sharp. Text on the screen looks crisp, as you'd expect from a 1080p device. The LCD panel on the Nexus 5 is no joke. The LCD technology utilised in the Nexus 5 has its pros and cons, the pros being great outdoor visibility and quite a bit of brightness to play with. However, in the contrast department, the Nexus 5 tends to look a bit washed out, and this is especially true when you compare it to other phones with AMOLED displays. Now, some people may like less contrast, but the Nexus 5 just steps over that line. The blacks really don't pop on this LCD display, but that's the only negative aspect of the display though. Overall, the Nexus 5 provides a great viewing experience. Okay, so the third positive aspect, the performance. So when you buy a smartphone, you usually do a lot of things on it. Anything from keeping in touch with friends, to checking emails, to multitasking. A smartphone is your digital life in your pocket. So it's important that things happen quickly. I'm glad to report that during my time using the Nexus 5, I never really had to wait for anything to happen. Applications opened up instantly, and switching in between applications was also a breeze. Overall, the Snapdragon 800 provides more than enough power and speed for the average user. This is the same processor used in a slew of high-end smartphones at the end of 2013. So in any task from multitasking to gaming, the Nexus 5 definitely has more than enough power. So the fourth positive aspect, the camera's low light performance. Low light performance on the Nexus 5's camera was probably the most pleasant surprise. It seemed to capture a lot more light than other devices like the Galaxy Note 3 and HTC One. To see more on camera testing, check out my video that I did comparing the HTC One, Galaxy Note 3 and Nexus 5 in low light video and audio quality. The performance test will be in the description below. Along with the good low light performance was great image stabilization and great audio quality during video recording by the Nexus 5's microphone. Those things really impressed me, but that's where the good news stops. The Nexus 5's camera actually has a slew of problems, but more on that later. So the last positive point, the software and the quick updates. Having a Google Nexus device means that you get the purest Android experience possible. So this means no skins like HTC Sense or Samsung's TouchWiz bogging down the hardware, slowing the system down over time. If you're just a really simple person who just wants to use your phone and don't really care about all those bells and whistles, then this is a good thing. All you have is what you need and nothing more. In addition to the pure Google experience, you're first in line for all the software updates as well. So this makes a lot of people happy. So those are the positive aspects of the phone. Now it's time to move on to the things that weren't so good about the Nexus 5. So if you take a look around the device, you'll easily see that there's a lack of a micro SD expansion slot, or any memory expansion for that matter, and there's no removable battery. Fine, you might say, there's not much use for removable batteries these days. A lot of phones have them sealed in. And that's true, and that would be fine with the Nexus 5 if the battery life was actually decent. The battery life on the Nexus 5 was pretty bad. I struggled to make it through a full day. It was actually pretty difficult. The battery life was probably the number one negative aspect of the device. And even if you get past the battery life, you still might have to deal with the camera. The stock camera app seemed pretty slow and basic. It takes over a second to open sometimes. And once you're in there, you find yourself with a lack of options. And once again, if you're just a simple person that just wants to get into things and just pick it up and it just works, then this might be okay for you. But some more advanced users who aren't happy snappers might be a bit frustrated with the lack of options within the camera app. For example, there's no option to tap to focus during video mode. Photos sometimes can be a bit blown out and soft, and videos tend to be on the dull side. Moving on, another negative aspect of the Nexus 5 are the speakers. Even though the call quality is decent, the loudspeakers aren't. Tinny, soft, and weak is all I can really describe them as. Alright, so that's all the good and all the bad of the Nexus 5. So what's the conclusion? What's to really make of all of this? Well, if you want a clean, total Google Android experience on a phone with a great screen, snappy performance, looks great and feels great, has great low light camera performance with quick software updates, but don't mind no expandable memory, midi-core battery life, a slow camera app, and pretty average loudspeakers, the Nexus 5 will definitely be a solid choice for you. You may not get all the bells and whistles that the other flagship phones have, but the bottom line is, when you're getting this much power for $350 unlocked, the Nexus 5 is definitely worth a look.
ColdfusTion. It's new thinking.